All right, we are live. As it says, you're live. Welcome to the American Canaries podcast number 3. And with special treat, we actually have a guest. So we hope in the future to have a guest for every podcast, however frequently we do this. We've been doing this about one every 2 weeks or so. That's what we're doing. So I am the friendly host, Ken Katz. With me, we have Jeff. Pronounce your last name again so I don't screw it up.
Ewick.
Ewick. Okay.
Yeah,
Ewick sounds like Buick without the B. And
that's right.
our special guest is Norwich's own David Lamb, who is now living in Toronto. So, David, why don't you introduce yourself? Tell us a little bit about you, and some of the matches you've been to in Norwich, some of your favorite players, some of your favorite experiences. Because for me, meeting someone who actually has attended a match is actually kind of neat. And I don't know how many of the people listening to this have actually been to a match.
Yeah, sure. So, and thanks for having me.
Sure.
Really appreciate that. And hi to everybody. Yeah. So my name's David. I'm on Twitter as Huckabee's Barber. I've been a Norwich fan for ever since I can remember. Certainly age of 5. First ever game was would have been Leicester. So I think I worked it out. It was Leicester City in December of 1981 when we were in the second division. So that gives you a bit of a sense. Born in Fakenham, it's about 20 minutes, I suppose, outside of Norwich, but lived all my life in Wales next to sea, which is on the coast there in Norfolk. So I've been here for about almost 24 years now. So yeah, that would be my first game. It's kind of remembering games is always a tough one. You remember seasons, I think, is kind of so. I can remember first time we went down, 1980-81. That was it was a tough childhood experience. But I remember coming back up, which was a lot of fun. Premier League season 92, 93, the inaugural season we almost won it was a real cool memory. Some of the games that we won, the first game against Arsenal where we won 4-2, but also just beating Villa, and actually having university housemates turn around and say, I think you've got this. I think you've won the first season of the Premier League. But we all know what happened there. And the 2 semi-finals, remembering those as well. Obviously, the first one, paled into insignificance. Really, it was the Hillsborough 89. But then in 91, when we lost to Sunderland, that was tough. But then, really good, happy memories of the European run as well. I was actually living in France at the time. And, but, remembering the Vitesse Arnhem and the Bayern Munich games as well, particularly, and then actually moved to Germany late in that year. So I could just always strongly remember watching them on ZDF and ARD and, people actually talking about us, Germans actually talking about us. Bayern Munich being very uncomplimentary about us and whilst we so that was a lot of fun. And then of course Milk Cup final 85. Too young to go, says my dad, but remember that strongly on the television. And then just countless cup games in the FA Cup in the 80s against Liverpool. We seem to draw Liverpool all the time.
Unfortunately,
Carrow, they're always big occasions. So those are always fun. Yeah, so just and then some kind of obviously 2015 game that was fun being playoffs over here and seeing some of my friends on the television and being able to sort of show them pictures of themselves on Canadian TV and that kind of thing. It was that was kind of fun. But yeah, just sort of standout games sometimes aren't even the games that are particularly important. I remember us beating Man United 2-1. Brian Robs with the it was. McGrath scoring for them, and sort of winning that game and beating Forest 2-1. So there's some of the games that just kind of stand out because they just create those memories. But yeah, I got a lot of memories of us over the years, and I just think very proud to be part of a great family club. Still am, and I think as I was saying to Ken at the beginning of this, the great thing about us is that, the not-for-profit thing, I think, not for-profit, but the kind of, the sort of self-financing element of us, it sort of speaks to that kind of family ethos as well. So I think that, there's always going to be a pride in supporting us and knowing that, you're always going to be running against the crowd anyway, in relation to this, and you'll always know what humility is and loss is, as long as but hey, I mean we had a lot of great memories as well, so that's that's important.
Who have been some of your favorite players over the years?
Yeah, oh, wow, it's a tough one. So I mean, I think probably back in the early days, going to see games, Mark Barham, who's now an ambassador at the club. It was a wiry winger at the time, was one of my favorites. Also, Martin O'Neill, when he played for us as well in that season with John Dean and Keith Burchin. That was, those were very much favorite players of mine. Steve Bruce, when he was a left back, when he was centre back for us. And then Andy Linnigan as well. Sort of big fans of those. But it's there's been a ton of great players. And then of course, then moving into kind of more modern times, just was just entranced and delighted by Darren Huckabee. It was always just being. There was a whole thing about him being on loan and would he actually become part of the team or not. I remember, we'd gone through some, we had some lean times after that, but the fact that he was going to come to us and then be part of the team, and then when we actually signed him, so that was a big one. And also for the short period of time as well, very excited by the Dean Ashton signing, and one of these players that if we'd had and we'd been able to stay around, I think would have been. I mean, he's kind of a club legend and lives, of course, in the area. As a lot of players do, right? A lot of players stay there, but was just always amazed by his talent, which I think was borne out. And I think if he hadn't had his injury, he would have gone on to be a great. And if we'd stayed up, I think he'd have stayed with us. So Dean Ashton was a big one. And then of course, moving into kind of modern times, just that. And I was just remarking on this earlier on when we're listening to the other podcasts when people talked about the fact that this particular team maybe is a little short on size and a little short on toughness. Thinking about that side, thinking about Grant Holt, and when he, the journey that he went on from playing for Forest and Shrewsbury and then playing for us in League One, but then being just as completely unintimidated by John Terry and various people when he came up to the Premier League was a big thing for me. I always remember when we played Chelsea, and it was the second. So remember, it was the second game of that season, and John Terry knocked him down, and then he knocked John Terry down, and John Terry was rolling around the floor, and he just went over and just mouthed something that was extremely audible, at him, and I just thought that's fantastic, that's what we need. But that really, I think that made just made you want to love Grant Holt. So yeah, so a lot of and just like a ton of people in between, and just some great memories, like some of the history making there. I was remembering that the first game I went to go and see was actually the first game we had our first foreign signing. Was a player called Drazen Mucinic from Hajduk Split, who couldn't speak any English at all, and they had to get
a Croatia,
Croatian
right?
translator.
Is that Croatia?
What's that?
Is that Croatia?
Yeah. So yeah. And Yugoslavia, of course, at the time, but part of Croatia, and he couldn't speak a word of English. And there were other Yugoslavian players playing in the league at the time. Ivan Golac played for Southampton, was a mainstay there. So us getting someone from Hajduk Split was great. But I can just remember that he didn't have, he couldn't speak a word of English, and they had to get a student of Serbo-Croatian studies from the University of East Anglia to run up and down the touchline. And that's what I can remember. So when I saw this person running up and down the touchline on the 5th of December 1981, didn't realize who it was until about 20 years later when I read it. In actual fact, this was someone that was yelling instructions to him in Serbo-Croatian.
Wow.
So it's stuff like that. There's been on, but people talk about foreign signings now in the Foreign Legion. First player, I think our first foreign player was Drazen Mucinic. He didn't play too many games, but that was back in the day. So yeah, lots of memories. I think that thing's just. It's a big family thing. It's one of the things, I got a big family back home. I'm the only one here. So it's just, it's a weekly thing, and it's a, daily text thing with my brother, who's a huge fan, lives in Liverpool, goes to see all the games in the Northwest. Massive fan. So, both united in our hatred for Robbie Savage, and just some of we've kind of been on a couple of, we went on when the Premier League in 2019, we were both in Florida, and we were doing and it used to be when the Premier League, because the Premier League do their own coverage, would invite hapless Norwich fans and various other fans on, and there'd be, there's always a guy who's like, right, mate, you want to come and do an interview, mate, yeah, fine. And my brother and I both did it from Florida, and Robbie Savage was on because my brother couldn't stand Robbie Savage, so it was so yeah, it's been a real odyssey and continues to be, and long may it continue.
That's funny. I'm always interested when foreign players come in. The degree of English that they know is always quite interesting. I have a friend at work who's actually from the Czech Republic, and he speaks like 5 different languages. And he told me that English is always the second language that everyone learns, whatever, wherever they are. You learn your native language, and then you learn English.
Mm.
So I'm always, pleasantly surprised when they sign someone that says, "Wow, English is pretty darn good." Versus here in the United States, you know, even people who are born here don't speak English very well to some extent. And there's no like uniform second language. I would say Spanish, maybe just because of the
Yeah, just
number of
because of the
Spanish speaking people in
population.
the
Yeah.
United States. I mean, I took Spanish for 4 years because I figured, well, there's more Spanish speaking people that I would have the opportunity to interact with, and more countries around the world that I would possibly be able to use use Spanish for.
Mm.
But it's always interesting to me when players come in that the language barrier isn't there, and also I think some of it has to do with isn't like the international language of international FIFA isn't like English the official language when the referees talk, isn't that what it is, unless they're both you know
I think you
but
have to
both
have.
teams, but both teams from you know two different the same country. I mean, they speak the same language. If it's whatever, let's say Brazil and Ecuador or whatever. Okay, the ref probably is not speaking English. He's probably speaking Spanish. But if it's mixed nationalities and mixed teams, I thought it was English as the official language.
I think you have to. I think you have to be proficient in it. I can remember, and I can't remember his name now, but it would have been in probably in the 1970s. Would have been one of the friendly games just prior to the 1974 World Cup. I mean, I was a year old, so it wasn't, something. It was a highlights thing, but it was a Scottish ref, and he was refereeing a game between Brazil and Portugal. And of course, they would share Portuguese as a language. Didn't know a lick of Portuguese, but was kind of, and so there was just this wild gesticulation, and that's all you saw was he just trying to communicate various things. It was quite funny, but yeah, I think you have to have a backup. You have to have a backup in English. My degree is German and French. That's what I did. It's frankly the only thing at school I could do. So it's what I did at university, and so it's actually quite interesting watching Farker and the others use Farker's English. His English was always actually pretty good, to be fair. But there are certain kind of phrases he uses and certain words he picks up on that you can see him using more and more. And of course, some of them are the same words in German that you would use to punctuate sentences or punctuate clauses. So the one that you hear it like every 5 seconds now is anyhow. So everything is, I have to try and do this, anyhow, and how we have done, a lot of, but I'm so happy. It's all. And I think it's because he doesn't have the stereotypical German accent. That's the thing, because he's done the kind of what it is. It's kind of like a TOEFL type thing. So he actually has his THs. It's not the kind of, I heard people do impressions of him and it's all Z's, and there's no Z's there because it's all, he has those, but it's the cadence which is funny. And it's funny when you listen to him, if you go did some old interviews of him when he was at Borussia Dortmund, it's exactly the same cadence, but it's in German. And that's the funny thing about it. He just completely maps it over to English. I was afterwards, I was pretty impressed with him, I have to say. I think he's got
That's interesting. So you pick up
he's
that
got
he
a certain
says,
style that when he does go, and eventually you will, I'm going to miss it, I think.
yeah. So you pick up that he says anyhow, as opposed to here, any athlete interview, how many times are they going to say, how many times are they going to say
Sure.
like?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's
I have to say, like he picks up on these great. There was the best line, and it hasn't got enough play, but it really ought to. Was just after he renewed his contract the second time, and he was talking, sort of fairly frankly, I think, about the fact that he had offers from other clubs, and he said, I've had offers, and this kind of stuff. So one of the guys, I think it was from the Daily Telegraph, said, no, it wasn't Telegraph. I think it was the Independent. Said, you've had offers, beyond your wildest dreams. And he was about to carry on, and Farkas said, I just want to say that, football is not in my wildest dreams, I can tell you that. And just carried on, and it was just like, you kind of get a look at Farkas and think, I got a very good idea what might be in your wildest dreams. And it probably isn't football. But it was just the fact that he was able to say that was fantastic. And it just showed, it's one thing to be able to speak a language, but it's something else to be able to be witty in it. And I think he manages that. So I think that's That's a great thing. So I know everyone was kind of at him a couple of weeks ago when he went on his little, I think, it's fair, it was a rant, but he was trying to defend, I think, a little bit of, trying to give a sense of, there's a lot of things you don't see.
Right.
And about players that are committed to the club, and you might not necessarily see them deliver on the pitch at the moment, but he was trying to give his side of it. But I would say, frankly, other than that, he got quite a lot. I think he probably got a lot more grief than that than he really deserved. And of course, it was a shame that then followed on, what I think was essentially the worst result of the season. But I think in general, I think his ability not to put a foot wrong is pretty extraordinary for someone who, it's not his first language, whatever one may wish to say about it. It's not. And his ability to be able to manage the media. And again, for someone who, previous experience was Borussia Dortmund 2, it's pretty good. Like, and I think that's, and it's not obviously, we're not paying him for that. And as Roy Keane would say, it's like, I don't know if you've seen that last thing with Gary Neville where he says like, he comes across well. And he says, well, after you've lost, sounding good, well, that's great. And it's because there's something to that, but at the same time, it's I think he's got a lot going to him, and I would really, I was saying this on one of these Twitter things at the end of the game with Stuart Hodge, with Hodgie, and it was you want to see it. I really want to see him succeed. I really would like to see him come out of this, and I'm also thinking, you look at what's happening at Watford. Claudio Ranieri, seriously, how long is that going to last? We all know that's going to last 4 months. And if it lasts until the end of the season, the man's done well. I don't want that. I don't know about you guys, but I certainly don't want that. And I would like to see him try and pull this out of it. And I think that, at least if Saturday did nothing else, it gave us something to build on. Whether we're going to stay with 5 at the back for the rest of the season, who knows? But I do think that it's something for us to build on. So let's hope.
Yeah, agreed. Before we talk about that, I don't know how many of you were on the Q&A for the Canaries Trust AGM. Did you happen to see that, either of you two? Okay. Well, I was particularly pleased.
I caught a bit of it, but not all of it.
Yeah, I was particularly pleased because Michael Bailey actually asked my question because for those of you listening, you may know that we are sponsoring 4 women's players on the Norwich City women's team. And we're pretty proud of that, and we're hoping to increase that sponsorship next year. So I asked, the question was supposed to be for Sean Hose, but he was not available. So it was someone else from the team. And basically the question was, okay, how does the sponsorship money help the club?
Yeah.
And it was interesting. It's like, well, it's like bonus money for the players and some things that opens up opportunities for them and allows them to do things that they wouldn't be able to do. It helps them, do other things. So it's sort of, because we have this extra money, now they can maybe do public appearances. It was just kind of interesting, because we're in it for like 16, it was like 400, or was it 400 pounds? Was it 400 pounds a player? Because I know we
something like that. Yeah,
400 pounds. We had to give something like over $2,000. And thank you everybody who contributed. That's awesome, and we hope next year to be able to contribute more. But Jeremy Goss was on too. Goss was on, and a guy named Alan Arbor, and Alan Arbor was really, really an emotional presentation. He wasn't live. He recorded it. He has something called the Offside Trust, and the Offside Trust deals with people that have been abused through English football. And, he was, I believe, sexually abused at a very young age. And now he's developed this to bring up awareness of this and to make sure that hopefully this doesn't happen again. So I was really unaware of it. And Robin Sainty, who many of us know, who's head of the trust, told me, he says, I've known him 40 years and didn't know, that. So it was really good. But Jeremy Goss was on, and Jeremy talked about a lot of really interesting things. Basically said that he was disappointed that the club wasn't kept together. He thought that if the club was kept together after, the run of the initial Premier League season, when they, went to Bayern Munich, he really thought that it had a chance of staying in the Premier League, for a long time. And he was disappointed that so many people were sold. And his take on it was like, I thought we had something here. We could have really done something big. I was disappointed. It was sort of the end of my playing career, and it was disappointing to not be able to go out on a high note. So it was really interesting, to hear what he had to say um, about that. And it was because I'd heard him speak like two or three times before.
Mm.
And this is the first time it was really an introspective question where he was saying things like how frustrated he was. He really wanted things to occur. He also mentioned something that was interesting about the best way to describe it is hazing that occurred in the locker room when he was a young player. He said it wasn't anything because he was picking up what Alan Arbor said. By the way, Arbor is Arber, not like
Mm.
Ann Arbor.
Yeah, no, it's
Um,
an Albert, yeah.
for those who are let's and he said that there was a lot of hazing, caught a lot of grief from the older players that
Yeah.
they were constantly getting on his case and not helping the players. Like, oh, you think you're good? You're not good. He basically was just getting crap all the time. And he says it was unfortunate because I'm a good player and I have to come to the locker room every day and hate being in the locker room because these older players are giving me such crap all the time.
Mm.
He says, I'm not. He says, okay, I learned from it. I learned how to play better, but he says he really didn't appreciate that, and he feels that hopefully that's changed where older players aren't coming in like you're not having hopefully Timu Puki is not like, oh, Josh Sargent's on the team, young buck trying to take my place. Hopefully he's not just giving him lots of grief all the time. He's like, hey, let's play together, let's figure out, let's work together. I'm hoping that it's a situation where the older, more established players aren't like, oh, let's haze the rookie,
Yeah. Yeah. There's a
which
lot you don't know, isn't there? I mean, it's funny, isn't it? Because I think certainly in the first championship winning season, um, and I think beyond, I think the spirit's been pretty good. I mean, it's hard to know what the impact of 2019 20 was really, 1920 was, but certainly you got the sense that they really liked each other and worked for each other, and I think that was very much a hallmark of it. But yeah, not always the case, and I mean, I'm trying to think about situations. So Paul McVeigh, who's gone on to write a book called "The Stupid Footballer Is Dead," and he went on to do a master's and I think a PhD. But anyway, certainly anyway, a master's in psychology, and he wrote about the experience of him. And Paul McVeigh, of course, he's not a tall man, and we talked about the fact that Malky Mackay used to give him grief. And Malky Mackay, of course, very much so that's one part of the celebrated centre back partnership of the famous playoff run in 2000. And in the end, he just confronted Mackay and said, like, I don't appreciate this and I understand it. And he stopped. And but I think giving players the tools to be able to do that and equip them for that type of thing is not something that's necessarily particularly old. I think it's fairly recent. So it's funny that on the first point you made about us being a selling club, which is kind of where you're going with it. To observe with us, right? With the club, it's nothing new. We can remember, back in the early days. I mean, Chris. I can remember one of the biggest disappointments I ever had was when Chris Woods went to Rangers, and I just thought how terribly unfair it was. Because Glasgow Rangers at the time had Graham Souness as their manager and had a fairly serious benefactor. So they bought Gary Stevens from Everton, Trevor Stephen from Everton as well, and Terry Butcher, of course, centre back, and they bought Chris Woods. And I remember thinking, wow, we really are selling club. Then Dave Watson went to Everton, and they used to do clinics like Watson Woods coaching courses in Norfolk, and were very, very popular. So I remember that being the first one. And then, of course, in '89, that's really good team that we had that got the sort of the fourth and the fifth spot when Andy Linnigan went to Arsenal, and of course Steve Bruce prior to that went to Man U. So there's always been people that kind of got to a certain point and we had to sell them on. And then there was a lot of disappointment, I think, in 93, 94 when that squad broke up. The problem is that next season was a season that Blackburn bought. I don't want to be disparaging with Blackburn fans, but I think they would admit that there was investments there that led to them winning the league. And so Chris Sutton went there, and a couple other players went there. And it was kind of the nature of the business. We've never had a benefactor. We never had a lot of money. Back in those days in the Premier League, it didn't matter as much. But now it's the chasm is so huge that it's difficult to countenance anything other than us being that. And let's face it. I think if we hadn't sold James Madison when we could have been in significant trouble back end, final year of parachute payments, that type of thing. So I think you kind of have to accept it as being part of our modus operandi a little bit. But there are some times when you think, wouldn't it be nice, every now and again, wouldn't it be nice to sort of be one of these clubs that, or listen to fans that sit there and say, oh, what a terrible match that was in the Champions League. That must be awful.
Yeah, I think
the Champions League. How would it be
I don't
awful?
want to pay that much.
A terrible game the other night against Inter Milan, and it's a different world, and it's just you're accepting yourself on a different plane. And I always remember Colin Murray saying, this is a season ago, Jack Reeve interviewed him. You'd always be happy with the idea of the fact that I think probably since 2011 through to where we are today, we've had maybe one or two mid-table finishes. It's never dull. So you can take the it's never dull attitude and say, it's never dull can mean winning a championship. It can also mean going down to League One. So you have to kind of accept that. Or you can be in that place now where people are saying, I'm bored of winning the championship. I won the championship twice. It will be really good if we can consolidate our position here. And I think that's what we've got to try and do. The talk sport nonsense that, is abounding at the moment in Britain. There's a lot of social media chat about who we are as a club and shouldn't we be docked points if we go down for not trying. Never heard so much nonsense. People realize it's a cyclical business, right? I mean, Bournemouth spent a lot of time in the Premier League. They're now in the Championship. Burnley has spent a fair bit of time in the Premier League. They could go down to the Championship. Who knows where Brighton might be? And Sheffield United last season, the classic case of that, right? Everyone was absolutely talking about the barnstorming football they played and the investments they made. And wasn't Chris Wilder great? Next season, he's sacked halfway through the season, not even, and they did a dismal finish. So I think that's the problem that I think as football fans we have to face, and probably ask ourselves some searching questions about how disappointed were we that breakaway thing didn't happen last season. There's an argument almost that says, while that would take away from the kudos of the Premier League as it is now such a difficult thing to countenance being a winner in a Premier League or being part of a league that you'll never win.
Yeah, I don't care.
That I think is sort of getting people to think hard about that. So anyway, as far as I'm concerned, it wouldn't change anything that I like about the club or anything I like about watching Norwich or being a Norwich fan. But it adds makes for an interesting series of debates that we're starting to have this season.
Okay. For those of you may hear, Mark Foster finally joined. It appears Mark's having a party in his house or something.
Yeah, I'm in a loud house. What can you? I mean, it's always loud in my house, except maybe at 3 a.m.
God, don't talk to me about God. There's a couple times over the summer that I actually was like, my kids have really weird sleep schedules. I was up at 3 a.m. because when you take non-drowsy Allegra, you just can't sleep, So I've learned if I have to take that, I should take it around lunchtime as opposed to, it's like, what are you doing up at 3 o'clock? I can't sleep. So I'm coming down and I'm checking my phone and stuff like that. Okay. So Mark Foster has joined us, and, the founder of American Canaries, our football coach and sports legend, from his house and the Fort Worth Metroplex, and hopefully his tires are set up. I'll talk to you about the tires offline.
Yeah, let's leave that for offline.
Yeah. For offline. So, David gave a really, really good understanding of someone who is, followed Norwich at a young age all the way through as a native. What do you call people from Norwich? What is the moniker that's used?
It's probably not used that much. I think technically speaking, you would be a Norvikian or a Norvincian, I think, just by virtue of the fact that it's the Nordic. So the Bishop of Norwich, for example, is whatever his name is, Norvik, which is the kind of the Nordic use of Norwich. So I think that's probably what you'd be. As I say, like I feel a bit of an imposter saying that because I'm actually kind of it gets a bit of a country bumpkin, really, because I'm from the coast. I'm from Wales. So it's just Norwich was a place you went, if you really need to get something good from the shops.
Gotcha.
It would be like, any particular toy, for example, Star Wars, that sort of thing. We have to go to Norwich for that, or Sabutio is a big thing, right? I have to go to Norwich for that. Go to Langley's, if you were lucky, you could go to Lynn maybe, but if it wasn't Lynn, it'd be at Norwich, and
Gotcha.
people say, well, you may need to go there. So,
Okay.
well,
you have a Baltimorean here, or as we like to call Baltimoreans. Mark's a Texan. And Jeff, what do you claim? Are you a South Carolinian?
But I suppose I am now. Yeah. This is the longest I've ever lived anywhere. I'm coming up on 25 years, I guess.
There you
go.
Longer. So yeah, I'd say that.
Yeah.
There you go. All right, we're at 30. Let's see if we can do this in 15 minutes. So now we have 4 of us. Let's talk about what do we see? What do we, other than we got a point, they look competitive out there. There's some really good performances. There is some not so good performances. And then what does that, do going into the international break and then forward? What do we think we're going to see as far as the formation of the team? Who do you think is going to play? And I'm not even going to try and guess how many points we're going to get over the next matches or whatever. Who wants to take the floor? Then I'll speak at once.
Who wants to go first on that one? I was going to say.
Yeah.
You know what? I can start if you want. It's the most important thing. I think we worked hard, and I think that's actually pretty important. There were a lot of people after the Everton game who saw them troop off the pitch and were a little bit worried about what they saw there. So I think it's important. There was a scrap, and we thought we were going to get that type of thing. So it was important that we saw that. I was also quite pleased that even setting up as the 5 at the back, we didn't get the wingers squeezed out quite as much. You didn't see as much movement from Yanulis or Aarons as all that. I don't think Aarons is having the world's best season anyway. But nonetheless, we saw him work hard, so I think that's important. I would say going forward, I would want to see Yanulis start. I was upset on his behalf that he got pilloried quite in the way that he did against Man City. And I think it was good to see him back. I think he's got more experience than Williams. I think it's important he's a left footer. So I was actually quite pleased to see that back and pleased to see that work. I think we're going to carry on with the 5 for a little while, but I think we need to find out what the plan B is. But I don't think it's going to work with everybody. So I thought that was important. I thought it was good to see Norman play well. I don't think he played quite as well as everybody made out he played. I think we're still in that clutching at straws type thing at the moment. I thought he was good. And that he battled, he won most of his 50-50s, distributed the ball pretty well. I think he gives a certain amount of steel there, so it was good to see that. Still not, I think the Pookie and Sargent are developing an understanding, but I don't know that the two's going to work every game. And I saw, again, thinking a little bit about what we need to be dealing with in terms of distribution. It's going to be important for us because the main thing is, and we saw this, oh Lord, didn't we see this in 1920? The lack of practice or sharpness in front of goal is contagious, and the longer it goes on, the worse it's going to get. So you really hope we get a goal off someone's backside or something like that in the course of the next couple of games, because that's the issue that we have right now. The distribution is there, but the decision making in front of goal is absolutely appalling, and there's no way around it. It's simply it's deer in the headlights, as someone put it. It's like, oh my God, we're in front of the goal here. Do you remember what this thing is? It was never a problem last year, again, because we were piling them in. And the great thing is last year, of course, we had that defensive strength, which set it aside. So that was the thing for me. I think that's the thing he's got to work on next. If we can keep, also, I would say, can we please keep the same back 5 for the next 2 or 3 games? Because I think that was, we've got to keep, we've had no continuity there. So let's keep with that. But I think it's really got to be, let's really concentrate on getting the ball and doing what we can in training, so we're making the right decisions in front of goal, because otherwise it doesn't matter what you do, it's going to be over before it began.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off of that. I mean, final third has been an issue for the last several Premier League seasons, certainly. But just case in point, Kabak's run. He went box to box, and then he got there to the end, and it was like, oh my God, I made it this far. Now what? And he basically farted and fell down. Mm-hmm. There wasn't a lot of pressure on him, but he ran out of time to make a decision because he reached that point and really didn't know what to do, and that's when he lost it and kind of tripped. He got a call out of it, but to me, it was too deep to the box. I hate free kicks that are right on that line. I'd much rather be a few yards off of it.
Right.
Yeah, I think I'm in agreement with David. Final third is an issue. You talk about decision making. Didn't the club just spend £1 million on a decision making video system, the 360 system that is supposed to help them?
Soccer bot. Yeah.
Yeah, the soccer bot. Yeah. Thank you. I forgot the name of it. Yeah. But yeah, that's supposed to help them make those decisions. I was listening to Sirius XM soccer channel yesterday afternoon driving around, and one of the things they were talking about there was the rate of scanning of higher end players versus your mid-level players, and the number of scans per 10 seconds is infinite. It's almost doubled how much more they're scanning. I'm sitting here turning my head like everybody can see me, but they're scanning and they're doing more to see, okay, what have I got around me? I mean, you've got peripheral vision, but you have to scan to have a sense of what's going on around you. And to me, that soccer bot would be a big part of that. And it's just building that skill level. I don't know what kind of time return to the skill we can expect for improvement, but hopefully that's what that tool is for. Mm-hmm. So hopefully it comes up soon.
Well, Mark, I think some of what we're seeing is that the fact that you don't have the same players as last year. Buendia obviously is gone. I saw him by because for Mark and Jeff know it, and I've admitted this. I also follow Spurs, so I was telling David the history and honestly, if you just gave me the list of Premier League teams, I would have picked Tottenham just because they sound like the most British sounding team that was out there. So Buendia came on, really had limited effect in the Spurs Villa match. I watched him. He didn't start and really didn't have a lot of effect, but as opposed to the previous years where, he's the engine that makes everything go. He's not there. You also didn't have Cantwell the last two games. And Todd is incredibly hardworking, really fast and creative. And they had developed a rapport over the last couple of years. And Pookie's developing a poor rapport with Sargent and whoever else they throw up there. So I think they really haven't had a lot of time to really work together as a team. It's almost like, hey, here's your all-star game. Try and figure it out. You guys have 2 days to practice and try to do things. Or some of the times you see national teams, international play. So I would really like to see Cantwell be part of the team. I don't know what he had some personal issues. I don't know what it was. Hopefully everything's okay with him. I like how he plays. I think he's creative. He hustles. He needs to maybe eat a sandwich or two. He's a little slight. As far as Sargent, because I do watch a lot of Spurs, Sargent plays very much in the mold of Harry Kane. He's clearly not Harry Kane, but he hustles. He goes back on defense. He makes tackles. He's part of the free kick defense. So I see a lot of the elements of what I see Kane doing on that team with Sargent, and I'm very pleased to see him working so hard and not be a defensive liability.
Yeah, I mean, so there's a couple of things. I mean, it's certainly something what you say in that. I think Sargent's working out who he is. He's still relatively new to it. I mean, you can see it certainly when he gets the ball down the right, certainly on the right channel as he was. He's actually holds the ball up pretty well, which is something, Pookie's looking for the through ball. He's looking for the ball off his shoulder. He's not looking for anything in the air. So I think if there's a way that we can make that work for us, that's potentially something to do. And I think Sargent's got to work out how far he comes back to receive the ball. I mean, Pookie last season was all over the pitch. I mean, it was an extraordinary engine that he has. he'd be getting the ball from deep and bringing it forward. He'd be everywhere. Sarge is a little different, and I think he's kind of, he's got the ability to hold it up, and that's something that's will be useful for us. I would say that the point that you made earlier on about working together as a team, that's definitely something we're missing. That telegraph, that almost telepathic passing and presence and awareness that they had last season just isn't there right now. It's almost the exact opposite of it. There were a couple of times, and again, it was rank on Norman, but we give possession away far too easily. There were a couple of times where literally just passing. Norman received the ball kind of just in front of the box and ended up just literally passing the ball back to and it wasn't me because me wasn't playing, but anyway, to Vidra, I think he was. And you just think that just shows that a team that Farker probably doesn't know his best 11 yet, which is understandable. They brought in $30 million pounds of talent, but there is that telepathy that it's not there, and the passing is there, and that we hope is going to come with time. We just hope, obviously, 6 defeats in, that we haven't left it too late, and that we're going to have the ability to be able to catch up and get some points on the board. Got to say as well before, because Paul Jeff has now the word in edgeways. We really, I mean, again, it's sort of stating the obvious. We do miss Skip. I think Skip was a massive part of last season. His ability, I think, to be able to coordinate the play, to use Mark's point, he was able to make decisions. He's very good at actually looking around the pitch. He's as good playing with his back to the game as he was to his front. Played every single game, and it's no surprise to me that he's a big miss for us, and no surprise that he's a regular in that Spurs team. So,
right, yeah, he was like always. What did he play like every minute but 5 or something? I think they pulled him out of one
minute
game
until the game. He got kicked in the last game, right? So and wasn't in the last game. So
yeah, he virtually was playing the whole time. The same thing with
pretty much last season.
Højbjerg plays the same role. Now he's they're both in the starting lineup. It was the same sort of a role, but Skip was an outstanding player. Unfortunately, Tottenham was like, yeah, we loaned him to you. We want him back. Can you please have him? No, we know how well he did. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the experience. We're glad he helped you get there. But yeah, we want him back. So I think there's a lot has to be said for that. Okay, we're at 42. I really want to try to make this 45 minutes. So as far as going forth, who do you want to see playing? Do you like the formation? David, you said you like the 5 at the back.
I think we've got to stick with it. I'm not just where I like it. I think we have to stick with it because I think we need some continuity, and I think if we can learn to keep clean sheets with it, then why not? I think when we play Brighton, probably, and I think this is his big challenge, right? You can stay with the wing backs, or you can look at whether when Cantwell comes back, if Todd comes back, where does he play? Do we want to have Jolis in to get a bit more pace? I think if everybody comes back intact from the international break, we play the same game. I think we've got to win, though. I really do think we have to beat Brighton. We get a point there. It's not so much that Brighton are a bad team, and Brighton have got some quality. But by the same token, it's the type of game I think we've got to kick on from here. So I would actually be hoping to see us and I think we've got enough pace to get behind them. That's the only problem with the 5 is it doesn't give you the width, it doesn't give you the attacking strength because the wing backs are slightly more concerned about tracking back and leaving the 3. But I say let's stick with the same team and let's see what we can get against Brighton.
Yeah, I'd probably stick with it. I might be tempted to put Dowell in, try to get Dowell and Cantwell in if Cantwell can be back. Pair those two up with Sargent and Pookie up front, just because those two have worked together with Pookie in the past. So those are just more familiar pieces together, keeping that chemistry going. I'll be honest with the Brighton game. I'll be happy if we score a goal. They've only allowed 5 and 7.
Yeah.
So that's going to be a challenge for us to get anything in the net, I think, considering we've only scored 2. And we know where our problems are with scoring right now. So
Yeah, with Norman being the big offensive threat, it's like, okay, that was interesting.
Yeah, I love his cannon of a leg, but we can't expect that 10 times a season to pay off.
No, and it's not what we bought him for. I mean, at the end of the day, it's not what we bought him for. We got other players for that. We actually needed him to be the steal in the back. I agree with you about the issues around goal scoring. I mean, what I said a couple of times already this season is when we win, it's going to be a shock. We know that anyway. So, it may as well be at home, and it may as well be against, a team that we would at least be looking to try and get something from. But that's the big worry. I mean, the big worry is it just comes to your point. It's not only that you can't see where the next win's coming from. You can't even really see right now where the next goal's coming from.
Yeah.
And yet it could have been so different. That goal against Leicester gets allowed. Who knows where we'd be now? But I think that we're going to struggle, and goal scoring is where it's at. So let's hope that we see something happen on that we played Brighton.
It's true. And I know I think less guys are going on international duty this time.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sargent's not coming back. I forget who else at this point, but I remember seeing
Norman and Sargent, two important players,
Sargent,
are not going on international duty.
Playing, so that means Alabama Daly and Ida aren't going to play, I don't think. So I don't think they're playing. I don't know that Scotland are either. But I have to actually have a look. But I think we've got, certainly we don't have as many going away this time around.
Might help build that chemistry in the
right, which they haven't had a chance to. Plus the COVID issues, where they knock out 2 weeks of preseason matches.
Oh, preseason was a write-off. Yeah, it was.
Yeah, that was. Didn't help them. Like, oh, you're coming up, great. You get Liverpool first game. Thanks.
Always get Liverpool first game. We always have to have. Ridiculous. If they could have us play Real Madrid the first game of the season, that's what they would do. I swear to God.
I mean,
you're not even lying.
I mean, it's like me as the Baltimore Orioles fans with Major League Baseball in New York. It's like, how can we screw the Orioles this time? Oh yeah, let's. It's almost as if the Premier League. Oh God, Norwich is so annoying. Let's really screw them the first couple of games and make it really, really hard for them. What's the worst we can do? Ooh, that's it. Yeah, you get a gigantic steak for that schedule, dude. I'm like,
yeah. Let's take all the wind out of our sails before we can get our feet planted. So
I was like, okay. Yeah, Man City. My son's a City fan, so I'm watching that, thinking, all right, how bad is this going to be?
We're at 47 minutes, Ken.
Yeah,
just so you know. Okay.
All right, let's wrap this up so we can. All right, so I'd like to thank David as our first host, our first guest. Hopefully, we have more in the future. David did an outstanding job. Really appreciated learning some of the history, some of the background, the club, and your introspective that you provided.
Oh, thanks. No, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Yeah, I hopefully myself am going to meet up with another member of our group, Ryan Blumenthal, in New York. My daughter and I are heading up to New York City this weekend, so I'm hoping on Saturday to hook up with Ryan, a proud member of the New York Canaries, and what is he, the supporters board?
Yes, yeah, he's in the supporter panel.
Right. So before he says, like the last free weekend before he becomes a father. So.
Yeah, how many baby shower items are you going to get so that he can keep buying more kits for his little one?
That's good shout, Mark. That's good.
I cannot say anything because Ryan might be listening. I can't say a thing.
Yeah.
As to what's going on. Hope to meet him in person, and then we'll chat about it. All right, go ahead, the three of you, and then let's log off, and then we'll post this tomorrow. And because this is recorded on Monday, hopefully it'll be up on Tuesday.
All right, very good.
Right.
Perfect. Well, thanks for having us. It's been a real pleasure.
Oh, it was excellent.
Thanks for popping in.
All right, thank you very much. That wraps up American Canaries podcast number 3, subtitle, We Got a Point! All right.
There is
Thanks
a point
so
to all
much
of this.
to Jeff.
Yeah.
There is a
Floyd.
point to all of this.
Yeah, there's a point. There's a point to all of it. Yeah, we feel a little happier going into international break. All
Third
right.
time's the charm.
Thanks a lot, everybody, for listening.
Thanks, everybody.
Have
Good
a
night.
great week, and let's hope we, have a smashing of Brighton.
Absolutely. All right, then.
Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
then.
All right, later, y'all.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.